Pamiętam, czym jest. Podsumowanie dnia. Także zobaczymy, co tam później jeszcze popatrzymy. Zależy, co jest na GameSpocie i tak dalej. A na razie obejrzmy w takim razie ostatni dzisiejszy panel na Coliseum, jaki mnie interesuje, odnośnie respawnu.
Executive editor of Game Informer magazine. Today we're going to be talking to some of the people from Respawn Entertainment about all things Respawn, that's Titanfall, Apex Legends.
Czyli będą gadać o wszystkim.
Star Wars Jedi Fallen Order, which is coming soon. So let's get these guys out here. We only have 30 minutes. We'll start with Drew McCoy. He is the project lead on Apex Legends. And then we have Stig Osmussen, the game director of Star Wars Jedi Fallen Order.
No, wszystkich tych ludzi już widzieliśmy parokrotnie na tym E3. Oczywiście na EA Play.
The head of Respawn. All right. So let's just get started here. And talk to me a little bit about life at Respawn right now. It's kind of been the year at Respawn to a certain degree. Usually we get one game from you guys and then wait a few years or a couple of years. But you have two games that we know about, one more, a VR game that's going to be coming later. You're going to have three projects coming out this year. What's life like in the studio, Vince?
Prepping for E3 was a little nuts this year.
Yeah. Yeah, it was insane from the get-go.
It's good, though. I mean, they're two separate teams. So
In two separate buildings,
in
too,
two
right?
separate buildings, yeah. So they're each built up individually, so it's just, twice the amount of noise, but not really like pulling from each other or anything.
And where are we at in development on Star Wars? Is it fully playable yet? Are you still piecing it together?
You can play through the whole game right now. We still have to basically finalize everything, but
To dobrze wiedzieć, że gra jest już do przejścia.
playthroughs technically. But we're scheduled early July to have playtesting on the full game.
No na razie, generalnie nie wiem, raczej to będzie, zapisy z dzisiaj będą podzielone na panele, także nie będę panelu już jakby dzielił, ale będzie na pewno gdzieś tam później do obejrzenia, aż cały zapis będzie, także na razie dzięki za siedzenie ze mną.
It's the one that has Revenge of the Jedi on it too, still. So.
Have you had to change the locks on him from keeping him from bugging you guys while you're making the game?
No, I mean that's one of the things I think is really the best about Respawn is Vince just trusts everybody. I feel like he's got my back, and he doesn't really kind of get into our stuff. He doesn't try to offer any kind of feedback that's negative. It's always constructive. He doesn't try to give the prescription of how to solve things, but he does point things out when he thinks that they need to be addressed. Otherwise, we can just kind of do things the way that we want. Which is great, and I try to instill the same type of trust in my team. So, really, one of the best things about this studio.
Cool. And Drew, what kind of a distraction is it having Star Wars a building over from you? I know you guys are cranking on Apex, but that's got to be something like for lunch I'm going to go play the new level or whatever. Do you have that kind of access?
Yeah, well, I mean, we're all a bunch of nerds. We all grew up with Star Wars, so when it was even whispered about that Stig might be making a Star Wars game, it's like, oh man. So I've actually tried really hard to stay away. So at EA Play on Saturday, that was my first viewing of that demo. I saw a version of it, 5 months ago when it was totally undone. So
you haven't seen the full
I haven't even
25
seen
minutes.
I didn't do the behind closed doors. I'm still waiting.
We'll have to do that when we get back to work. You're gonna wait until the game?
No, I want to play. I want to sit down proper, put the kids to bed and crank the stereo and properly play it. But no, it's actually really cool because like you're saying, the teams are very separate, but we have a company meeting every Monday, and Stig gets up and gives a little update on what's happening on his project. I'll do it for Apex. And then Peter for the VR project. And so I get a little glimpse every now and then, and it's just enough little dopamine hit to keep me going, yes, can't wait. It's really cool.
Yeah, I was recently a fly on your wall for the cover story we did with Game Informer, and I actually got to sit in on a design meeting. I've never done anything like that, and it was fascinating because it was a bunch of fans. These are people that are building a level, which we can't talk about yet, but they're just sitting together and riffing off each other, right? Do you guys ever discuss game design with each other for your two games?
No?
Not really. There was a portion really early on when Stig had, we called it Team Five Guys, because there was 5 guys on his team, and he would do like an update to Vince and Dusty, the other studio head, and I would sit in. Sometimes Steve Fukuda, who was game director on Titanfall and Titanfall 2, would sit in and just kind of see where he was going and like, oh, I need to hire this kind of person, or we're working on these core fundamental things. But that was
We kind of got away from that.
2014, I think.
Yeah.
And it wasn't even Star Wars at that point, so no, not really.
And Stig, Star Wars is kind of like this sacred scripture among, fans of movies and games and all that stuff. Where do you even start in making a story, a new canonical story in the Star Wars universe? That seems like the most terrifying thing.
No właśnie. Wyobraź sobie tak, jak to jest móc stworzyć historię, która jest kanonem Gwiezdnych Wojen. To jest coś po prostu abstrakcyjnego i niesamowitego.
So making something with a lightsaber was really the only way we could go. From that point, I literally made like what I call a one-pager, which was actually more like 2.5 pages.
And that's basically gameplay ideas or story ideas?
It's a breakdown of like, these are the pillars of the game, and these are ideas about what the hero can be that we were talking about. I believe back then Cal's name was Boone.
It was what?
Boone.
Huh.
It was Boone Kestis. And we talked about, it described BD, and it was, on that first one-pager, that was his name, it was BD1, and it was really cool because you guys were finalizing, I think, Titanfall 2, and BT was all the rage in the studio, and I was just like, well, I got to come up with a name. So I put down BD1 for Buddy Droid 1, and that stuck. And it described like the mentor character that we have in the game, her name stuck, the pilot Grease, that stuck, and kind of the conflict of like what we needed. And I brought that to Lucasfilm, and during the discussion, it was clear that the time period that I wanted to have it in wasn't something that we could explore. So we went back and forth for a while, and we arrived at Post Order 66.
What was that time period? Can you tell us? Or?
No.
No, szkoda. Ale coś czuję, że coś pomiędzy nową tą trylogią a tą oryginalną.
Hinted at to Stig, or?
I mean, I think we had a lot of conversations about the possibility of doing it and what it could be, and so, I mean, tons of stuff. Some of the stuff is in there.
Yeah.
So, and I think having it set post Order 66 ended up being great because you get that drama of not being one of many Jedi. You're one of a few in hiding. So that
yeah, and it really plays to the game well because you don't have to be like the heroic Jedi because of the time period. It's all about survival, and that really feeds into the visceral gameplay that we wanted to have.
And Drew, what's it like at the studio? Like, you're making this game that's constantly getting new content. Like, fans demand more of these types of experiences.
Yes, they do.
Always.
What's it like in terms of development? I know people really wanted a lot out of the gates. It was a little slow getting there, but where are you at right now in terms of what's coming next?
Yeah, it's been a learning process, and we're not done yet. I feel like the Apex team, which was the Titanfall team, our superpower is finishing. Like, we're really good at having lots of grand ideas a few years out from shipping a game, and then whittling it down and scoping it and making really good stuff that we know we can hit one date to ship it, a couple years down the road. And now that we got to try and be shipping all the time with tens of millions of players banging away at our game, finding bugs and exploits we never even thought possible, it's been a learning process for us. So we took April and May as an opportunity for us to kind of reset some of our internal development processes, look at our pipeline a little bit. I wrote a blog post out to the community explaining our, how we are operating and on a seasonal cadence and all these things. And I think starting last week with the Legendary Hunt event for Season 1 and talking about Season 2 that's coming early July, we're starting to show like how we think we can do this. It's interesting though because Fortnite's really warped the perception of what's possible in games.
Sure.
An update every week, like props to the guys at Epic. I know they're probably crunching right now, but that's an amazing feat. Like
No właśnie, jestem ciekaw jak to jest w tym Epiku, jak oni tak napierdalają te update'y. Tam jest ten crunch, czy go nie ma, ile tam osób pracuje nad tym, bo to jest chore.
So we've had to get really clever about how we make decisions, how we pipeline our work, how we have multiple things in development like a character, a legend. We have like tons of them in development at various stages, whether they're prototypes that have been put on the shelf or ones that we are trying to finalize, like Watson, so that we can kind of give ourselves the levers to pull to make sure we're shipping the right stuff at the right time and putting the right resources where they need to be.
And getting better, like honing in on that process, because right
Yeah.
now some things take way too long, or even
Yeah, like a Legend right now, it takes 1.5 years, roughly. I think the quickest one has been 14 months. And that's kind of what it takes us right now to make really quality content, but that's not going to sustain forever. We need to get faster at it. So like, again, Watson, we were playing it last spring, I think.
And how much does the community play a role in that? Obviously, they give you immediate feedback on what you've done. Can that shift your plans as well?
Yeah, I mean, it's a balancing act. Like, you want to stay true to our like vision for the game. Apex is really the first game that we've taken a lot of user research and to kind of help guide where we're going. Past games, it was all about, you call it our gut, whatever we think is cool, whatever we think the right choice to make is. So now it's a balancing act between data, player feedback, and our gut. And I think we're going to screw it up. I think we're going to nail it. And, we'll just navigate as we go.
And we'll talk about kind of both games here a little bit, give a general overview. Star Wars, Stig, can you just kind of set the table for people? And where does the demo you're showing take place in the game?
It's Kashyyyk, the Wookiee planet. Yeah, we pick up about 3 hours into the game. Cal's on a mission to, it's a long shot to restart the Jedi Order. But more importantly, he wants to complete his training, so he hooks up with this mentor, former Jedi Knight, and she makes a deal with him. If he helps her on this mission, she'll help him complete his training.
And why are they going to Kashyyyk?
It's just part of the journey. If I really got into it anymore, it'd spoil the story.
So it's not a pit stop. They're on a mission.
Yeah. It's and in fact, you'll go there several times. Our game has multiple planets in it, and we're employing a Metroidvania design philosophy. So that means that you'll explore these planets multiple times, get new abilities that unlock new areas in the other planets, back and forth, retraversal. So we had to be very careful crafting a story that made sense to have several planets that are somewhat connected to each other.
Yeah, it was interesting when I went into the studio to see the game, because you were the creative director on God of War. Some of the people you had, God of War 3, some of the people you had on your team were also on that project. So I expected God of Star Wars, right? Or something more in line with what you guys have done on Titanfall, right? But no, it's like you kept referencing like the classics, like Metroid, in terms of like the cadence of unlockables and stuff like that. And also, you looked at games like Dark Souls for combat. So most Star Wars games are about flailing the lightsaber, being very acrobatic. What is your approach for combat here? What did you take from Souls?
To mi się najbardziej w tej grze nie podoba. Ja bym jednak wolał te podejście akrobatyczne, widowiskowe i proste. Bo dla mnie najważniejsza jest historia.
Level design. They have one-way doors that effectively do the same thing as abilities in Metroid, unlocking the map and building shortcuts. And our approach to combat was really, we wanted to do something different than what we had done at God of War, on the God of War games. And those were very relevant games when we started working on it. And our kind of the personality for our combat, we wanted it to be closer to the original trilogy. So really what that meant is doing something that was grounded and not super over the top, not like super powered force abilities. I mean, he still can do some really cool stuff, but it feels like it's fair to Star Wars in a video game world.
Well, he's still a Padawan, right? Like, so if you came back for a sequel, maybe he would be Knight?
We'll have to solve that another time. We still got to get through this game. But yeah, he's a Padawan at the beginning of the game. What we're showing people right now isn't the beginning of the game, and I think he's we're showing a little bit more powers than he would have at this point, 3 or 4 hours in. But he's still pretty powerful at the beginning because he has the ability to use the Force, and he's got a lightsaber, and makes him still fun to play at the very beginning without all the powers.
Yeah, one of the comments I saw from people was that it looked a little too easy. Just
It's
he's
not.
mowing down
It is
stormtroopers. No, I played parts of it against a lot of electro blades, a lot of deflection from enemies. You got to figure out their weaknesses, break their guard. But are you going to do difficulties though? Will people be able to-
We'll have to. We're figuring that out right now. We'll have to do different settings for that. I mean, if we wanted to, we could make something extremely difficult to, very easy, and that might be what we end up doing.
And then people are also wondering, like, there's the AT-ATs that we see in Kashyyyk. Will there be space battles?
Probably shouldn't talk about that.
Kurcz, zawsze jest taka odpowiedź. Probably shouldn't talk about it.
New content coming. So what can we look forward to? One thing that I kind of find crazy about the Battle Royale genre is the one map, right? Like, it's always that one location. Can we expect changes on that as part of this next season?
If you watch the EA Play demonstration on Saturday, what day? I'm totally lost on time right now. There's a little teaser at the end. We got some stuff coming. All I can really say is keep your eyes open over the next few weeks. Watching everyone online talk about the space cows moving around the map. So just keep your eyes open.
And let's talk a little bit about designing the legends. They're all very distinct. Can you kind of walk us through your philosophy in figuring that out a little bit?
Yeah, it's been a really big learning process. We've never done a game with such personality to characters beyond like story-driven games. Like BT in Titanfall 2 was a previous high watermark for us, which was like just to design that character and figure him out, not even gameplay-wise, was like a 9-10 month process. So the legends for us, we actually approach them similarly to how we approach single-player levels in Titanfall 2, in that they're a very big collaborative process between designers on the mechanics, writers on their background and personality, animators. They're probably one of the bigger influences on personality of the legends. The concept artists, always knocking it out of the park with really cool character designs. I think one of the things we nailed a lot was the silhouette of characters. You can read who each one is from a distance, and then trying to learn how to bring a skin on top of that so players can express their own personality but not affect gameplay. But it usually starts from a gameplay perspective. We're a very design-driven team. They kind of set the tone and cadence of what we're trying to make. And it's all about player mentality. What kind of player is going to attach to this character? So like Watson in Season 2 is a good example of, we only had one defensive character in the game, Caustic, and we had a designer, Griffin, he's got a friend who's an engineer who likes to, we call it min-max. He tries to do the best amount of stuff with, minimal amount of downside. And he wanted to make a character for that player type, and that's where Watson was born from. So those mechanics that, they are now over a year old were kind of played with a lot. We prototyped it and said, okay, this character's gonna be good. Now we gotta figure out who this actually is. And that's when it goes to concept artists and animators and modelers and everyone, and the writers to figure out who they are, how they fit in the universe, what their personality is, give depth to them, because for us, it's not just about making fun gameplay with the legends, it's also about creating emotional touchstones for people to attach to. And for me, the litmus test of whether or not we've been succeeded at that has been all the fan art and the cosplay and people calling Caustic their dad and like all these funny memes and things. Like, to me, that shows that we're hitting at some fundamental like emotional level that's resonating with players. And I think that's core to a character game being functional, because if you don't care about them, like, the gameplay only takes you so far. You have to want to immerse your brain in these characters and in this world.
And Vince, these are very different games, but is there a through line for all Respawn games? Is there something you're trying to hit with each of your games?
I think one of the core pillars that we always look for is the game has to feel good at its core, right? It's all about the gameplay. We're making interactive entertainment, so I think that resonates through both teams like really well. And if you notice, like watching, you've played Apex, you know the feel, everything's about how reactive it is. Jedi has that too, where when you play it, and you've played it, so you get that feel just comes through.
And I gotta ask you, Apex is a Titanfall experience, right? But what about Titanfall 3? Anything you could say other than no comment? I'm gonna cut you off right there.
We don't have anything planned at the moment. We put, Apex is kind of where our resources are going, and we're looking at things for the future, but right now there's nothing planned.
And Stig, So on the Game Informer cover, we have the second sister. You don't want to talk about her, I know, like how she's involved into the story. She's hunting Cal. Will there be other threats along that?
Czy będą inni inkwizytorzy? I co będzie w ogóle z inkwizycją w tej grze?
Like boss type characters.
Yeah, or other Inquisitors, or maybe Darth Vader.
We aren't going to get into that stuff right now, but there certainly are other major battles to be had against different opponents in the game.
And one of the coolest things you told me is kind of the inspiration behind BD1 was a boy and his dog, basically. But also you had the code name for your game was Bird Dog, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Can you walk through that a little bit?
We talked about Woodstock from Charlie Brown Peanuts, that little yellow bird that's Snoopy's friend, getting some of that personality into the character, but also, yeah, like a loyal dog. It's a boy and his dog story because he's young. When we kind of figured that out, it was strange because not only did we have this BD thing that I was talking about before, but the code name for our game was Bird Dog. So there was just all these things that just converged and made it seem right.
It just lined up perfectly,
Yeah.
right?
The Force was with us.
And then let's also talk a little bit about the supporting cast a little bit. You got Sear.
Deborah Wilson, she's a great actress.
Yeah, how do you get someone like that to come in? Like, did you pitch her on like, hey, do you want to be a Jedi Knight, or did she?
We hired a casting director, and they started doing they cast a really wide net, and they started sending in audition reels, and that's how we arrived on every cast member in the game. Some of them it only took a couple rounds. Some other characters we had to go several rounds.
And then one thing a lot of fans are asking about is the length of the game. I know you guys are still trying to figure that out. There's cuts that are made, things that are added.
Yeah.
Can you give us a general?
Yeah, it's big.
To jest dobra odpowiedź.
To be honest with you, I don't know exactly. I don't know exactly how long it is right now. It's definitely not a 5-hour experience. Like
No, biorąc pod uwagę, że ma elementy Metroidvanii, to będzie długa gra. Będzie bardzo można będzie ją powtarzać.
Those types of things, we start to dial those in, but it's going to be a worthwhile, meaty experience.
And are you guys hiding anything in your games, like anything from Apex showing up in Star Wars, or vice versa?
I'm not sure Lucas would be too
We
happy.
can't, yeah.
Separate you can't combine those universes.
No.
That would be awesome, though.
And Vince, what's your kind of takeaway watching these games kind of come to life? First, let's start with Star Wars. What's kind of your takeaway right now on that game?
For us, it's about, or for me anyway, it's about growing the studio and getting in like a new kind of game than we've made in the past. And working with Stig, I pursued him for a while, finally convinced him to come over, and that's the kind of game that he really wants to make. It affords people in the studio a chance to go and work on a different team, on a different kind of game, to learn more, to maybe get a promotion where they didn't have that chance on the Apex team yet. So, like having that team there and kind of pushing each other has been great.
And then what about Apex? I mean, you guys kind of surprised the world with just launching it without even announcing it. Like it was 1-on-1. Like, here's our new game. You can play it right now. What's that like, seeing it kind of grow post-launch?
Good and challenging, right? Like we're learning how to be a live service studio. It's not something that was our core competency. So it's been challenging, but part of that challenge is fun. Part of it is
Terrifying.
terrifying. Yeah.
Wake up in a cold sweat, at least 2 days a week. It just happens.
We care about what we do, and we want to make sure we're servicing it right, and we, keep the fans happy, and we keep the team happy. So it is a real balancing act on doing enough content, but not burning out the team. And it's important to us that everyone is really invested in what they do.
All right, and they're telling me to wrap it up here, but Stig, can I get a double-bladed saber?
Not talking about that.
O, każdego odpowiedź jest identyczna.
Maybe?
Your pre-order bonus is an orange one.
What was that?
The pre-order bonus, you could do an orange one. You got to be able to do a yellow lightsaber.
You can do an orange one.
I guess we'll have to wait. The game's coming out when? November 15th?
That is correct.
Apex Legends is out now, and Vince,
And season 2 coming.
Season
July
2 in
2nd.
July. Yeah.
when can we hear more about the VR title?
Probably Oculus Connect this year, yeah.
All right.
We'll start to show something.
Cool. Well, thank you, gentlemen, and thank you all out there on the live stream and here in the auditorium.
Thanks,
Have a good E3.
everyone.
No i słuchajcie, na tym w takim razie kończymy.
In my head. Yeah.